The president told Russian officials in the White House that James Comey was crazy, a real nut job. What's your reaction to him telling Russian officials that?
I find it outrageous. It's remarkable that a president would demean a director of the FBI that way. It's remarkable that he'd say that to the Russians. This may have been, I guess, the same meeting where he was also disclosing classified information. In a certain way, you just can't make this stuff up.
Senate Intelligence Co-Chair Mark Warner, the Democrat, earlier this evening. We're back with Hans Nichols, Jeremy Bash, Bianna Golodryga, and Eli Stokols. Jeremy, for the legal angle here, set the scene for Comey's public testimony.
Well, he's going to have to walk a fine line, Brian, because on the one hand, he has the venue there in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee to lay bare everything he can speak about in terms of the president putting the arm on him to try to shut the investigation down. On the other hand, we now know that this is a central line of inquiry for the Mueller investigation, for the investigation now being led by former FBI Director Bob Mueller as the special counsel. And we know that in part because one of the reasons Rod Rosenstein essentially recused himself and tossed us over to Mueller is because Rosenstein is now a witness in that matter, because Rosenstein's memo is a material fact that will play into this issue. So Comey's going to have to walk a line here, and it's unclear how far he will go. But when he testified in 2007 about confronting the Bush administration, that was pretty dramatic, and I expect some high drama in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee as well.
Bianna, it's unfair that you are so often the only Russian-born member of our panels at 11 o'clock at night, so you get the question. Let's talk about leverage, though. Where does the balance, as you look at this, the entire length and scope of the Russia matter, where does it stand?
Well, it may be a be careful what you wish for from a Vladimir Putin standpoint. I mean, there's no doubt that his re-election campaign was just created over the past few weeks. I mean, his popularity is soaring in Russia, if for no other reason that we're sitting here and talking about him. But for people to understand the dynamics between relations and how this played out, and is Donald Trump really in touch with Vladimir Putin? Every single Russian businessman and oligarch and every person that the president and his associates have been tied to in Russia has some connection to Vladimir Putin. It doesn't work that way in the U.S. It does work that way in Russia. So when we're trying to find the one piece that connects the two, it's going to be really difficult, because any sort of Russian businessman of influence will have a connection to Vladimir Putin. The question is, what is it that Vladimir Putin asked of them, and what is it that Vladimir Putin knows, and what is it that he wants to do, if any, here vis-a-vis our election system?
And Eli, about that place you cover, no one who I've spoken to in contemporary history has seen any place leak as much. There's never been as many inside sources. People, as the Times reporter said tonight, willing to raise their hand and say, this isn't right.
Right. I mean, I think Donald Trump has yet to really come to grips with the fact that there are checks and balances on his power here, and is really sort of facing something of a soft coup. He's never managed anything nearly as large as the federal government, and within that government there are a lot of whistleblowers and people who are coming forward and revealing information to reporters about what is actually going on. This has really been true since the president took the oath of office. We've seen a number of leaks, but we're now seeing them in a matter that pertains to national security and perhaps the longevity of this administration. And I think it's really frustrating inside the White House over the last week. The president has felt, sort of penned in here, doesn't know what to do, is frustrated, and has blamed his communications team, even though the communications team, messaging here is not the problem. It's the president, his sort of indiscrimination when it comes to what he says out loud, what he says in other settings, and is constantly sort of surprised when these statements in these meetings that he thinks are private find their way into the newspapers. He has yet to really learn about this sort of the vast government, the reaches of this government, and all the people out there, and all the ways in which his sort of managerial style is not really a great match for what he's trying to do.
Eli, it's your reporting that he's been warned again about the tweets. Is that just from a comms, a staff level, or is that legal, or both?
No, it's both. I mean, going back over a month after the first tweet that, when he said President Obama, wiretap me, there was what one person involved called an intervention in the Oval Office, saying you can't keep painting yourself into corners politically and perhaps even more importantly legally. And they're frustrated because they feel like he continues to not sort of really absorb that lesson. He tweeted last week about the tapes that James Comey, he better hope there aren't tapes. Well, that's led to subpoena requests for a number of White House recordings and communications. And so he continues to not really understand this in spite of the best efforts of people around him. There is really a lot of resignation that I have seen on the faces of White House staffers, including Sean Spicer this week, in terms of trying to sort of come out and message for this president. There is a real defeated feeling around the West Wing that we just haven't, it hasn't been as palpable up until now.
Now, Hans Nichols, finally, I have to show you two pictures. Number one, we showed just before the break a scene that actually took place today, and we're accused of not showing enough good news out of the White House. This was captured, Mama and her baby ducks, by the Associated Press photographer in the driveway. If you don't think that's cute, you're not put together right. But I want to also show you a photo that Hans Nichols put out on Twitter of something he looked up, saw, and captured. That's the old executive office building. Looks like about the third floor balcony. There were red Solo cups witnessed in the hands of executive wing aides.
Yeah.
A Wheels Up party is not an uncommon thing in the old executive office building, especially among presidential advance people on the road, who are some of the hardest workers and hardest partiers in American politics. But Hans, unusual that this one was in full view of the entire press corps from the West Wing.
Look, we're not going to begrudge anyone at the White House for having a tough week, and we don't know what's in those red Solo cups,
True.
So let's be clear on that. But, in general, when the White House is in crisis mode, you see everyone kind of hunkered down and battened down. This didn't have that feel. One of the photographers that has a long lens zoomed in, and one of the folks up there that was just kind of hanging out was the OMB director, Mr. Mulvaney. So this wasn't just staffers up there. This seemed to be a group-wide party. And look, they're entitled to their party, but they were in public view. And, I got a little bit of flack from the White House for tweeting that picture out. Look, they were in public. We take pictures. They're in a difficult time now. They're in the public eye. They're on the public payroll. I'm not going to make any apologies for that. Just take one final point on the sort of the level and the velocity of leaks that we've had. Most of the leaks you have in a White House are usually one staffer kind of sandbagging another staffer, or one staffer trying to leak something to get their policy position now. The leaks that we have coming out of the Trump White House are leaks about the president, about the principal. And that's not something we've seen for some time. And I don't know what the distinction is between leaking and whistleblowing, but it seems to me that when you think you're seeing something absolutely wrong and then you need to call a whistle on it, that's more in the whistleblowing category than pure leaking, without making a distinction here on what we've seen, in the last 24 hours. But leaks are usually staffers basically ratting each other out. These go to the very top, and that's an interesting dynamic to me.